We have got another prospect profile for you today as we talk about whether Adam Novotny could be a fit for the Blue Jackets at 14th overall. That's coming up today on Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team, and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. And we've got another prospect profile for you today. Like I said at the top of the show, Will Scouch is back, and we'll talk about Adam Novotny today and whether he could be a selection for the Blue Jackets at the 2026 NHL Draft. Will's got a lot of smart things to say about him, about how he projects, about whether he could be a fit in the Columbus system. So I'm just going to get right into my conversation with Will. We are back. We are continuing our prospect profiles. We've got Will Scouch, who is back. He did such a great job with the first episode that we've got him to come back and do another one. We're talking about Adam Novotny today, who just had a pretty good season with the Peterborough Petes and is looking like a guy that is maybe going to be one of the sneaky risers that we talked about at the end of the last episode I did with Will. So let's get straight into it. What can you tell us about Novotny? What's his scouting report? What's his pros, cons? What are we looking at for Novotny as a player?
Yeah, Novotny's fascinating. He's been all over my list all year. Like going back to the summer, he was a top 10 guy to me, watching him in the Czech League last year. This year, he's been as low as a fringe first, and now he's kind of somewhere in the middle. I have him at 11 right now. I think there's a lot to love about Novotny's game, and the big thing for me is just the pace at which he plays the game, his forechecking ability. Like when he's really dialed in, he can be a real monster for an opponent to handle. He will hound you, he'll stick check you, he'll throw you into the boards, but he'll make plays. He can really shoot the puck. And that's kind of where he leads with. Like his shot is kind of where he is probably going to make a lot of his money outside of his sort of off-puck forechecking play. Last episode, we were talking about a Jack Hextall. And I think that a guy like Novotny with a guy like Hextall makes a ton of sense. I think that they would offset each other's strengths and weaknesses very, very, very well. And I think it exemplifies how, what a guy like Hextall brings to the game, and also what Novotny brings to the game. The thing about Novotny that I would say is a bit of a concern is just that some games you just don't see the same player. Like there are some games where I've watched Novotny and I just go, yeah, he got a couple of scoring chances, but man, he was a step behind on a bunch of plays and just not really sort of getting deeper into the offensive zone, and not, just a lot of really frustrating traits that make it really difficult with young players to hit the NHL. It's just a lot of things where you go, yeah, I could see how you could get some production here on this and this and this, but that's not going to be a thing in the NHL. And but then on the next shift or the next game, you'll see him just absolutely light the place on fire. And so it's a matter of, like, I guess your impression of him as a kid and the coach's impressions and how you do your sort of intelligence gathering on him, because that's the uncertainty with him for me. Is there are some games where I love Novotny, and there are some games where I go, I don't know if I would take this guy unless he sort of slips and he's a bet. But the pace he plays at and the finishing ability and the physical play that he has had at times is really notable. And I think that that's kind of what made him very interesting last season, like when he was back in the Czech Republic. And this year you see flashes of it definitely with Peterborough. And, he I think at times has really taken on a good leadership role with Peterborough. And I think there's a lot of upside there, but there's a few guys this year, and he's one of them, where I have a lot of concerns, but if it works, it's going to really, really work, I think.
I've got more of my conversation with Will in just a second, but first I've got to tell you all about 5 Hour Energy. If you've got a sweet tooth like I do, you know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without all of the sugar. That's why Cotton Candy's 5 Hour Energy Shot brings that nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. This is that classic cotton candy taste you remember, but with a tasty caffeine boost and 0 sugar. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. I've always loved cotton candy, but I can't be eating it all day, every day, and this is a perfect alternative. Just a little small portable shot. I need to pick me up. I can go in my bag if I'm traveling. It can just kind of hang out in the cupboard at home. They take up basically no room, and they are delicious and just a lot of fun, right? Sometimes it's nice to have a little treat that doesn't have a billion calories in it. Bring on the sweetness with Cotton Candy 5-Hour Energy Shots, available online now at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. I've also got to tell you about FanDuel. The NBA players are here and every possession matters. If you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, you can turn $5 into $150 for just getting started. Just go to FanDuel.com, find the heaviest favorite you possibly can, put $5 on it, and if that $5 comes through, then you get $150 to spend on whatever you want. The FanDuel app is great. It's super easy to use. It makes playoff basketball even more engaging from start to finish. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Yeah, well, if there's one thing we love here at Locked On Blue Jackets, it's a high-risk, high-reward prospect.
Oh, yes.
Especially in the mid-first round, But I feel like, and I haven't done a ton of research into Novotny. He really only came to my notice because one of my wonderful everydayers, Ben, is a huge fan of Adam Novotny and he's the first guy to mention, this is who the Blue Jackets should draft. This is who the Blue Jackets should draft. Shout out to Ben for bringing Novotny to my attention. But I feel like he checks a lot of boxes for the Blue Jackets in like just a need in their prospect pool, right? Like they desperately need wingers. They need top high-end wingers, I would say. They don't really have what I would consider a pure sniper on the team. Obviously, he's not a pure sniper. He brings a lot of other stuff, but top 10 in goals in the OHL this season is super not nothing, right? I think he was 12th actually. But still, not a lot of guys score almost 35 goals in the OHL. Right. And I feel like I said, he checks a lot of boxes for what the Blue Jackets prospect pool needs. They've thinned it out recently. A lot of their better guys have graduated and, guys have gone elsewhere. We don't need to talk about Gavin Brindley. I'm still upset about it. But bringing Novotny in, I think, would address a lot of the holes that the prospect pool currently has.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to that. I think with him, I look at, I think Columbus has drafted kind of similar case studies to him before. I'm thinking like Luca Pinelli, Will Whitelaw is another one, Jeremy Loranger. Obviously, those guys weren't first round picks, but these were guys where they have a ton of upside and the raw fundamentals are so good. And especially in Whitelaw and Pinelli's case, especially Whitelaw, I would say, you just kind of sometimes want to grab him by the shoulders and shake him and go like, do you understand how good at hockey you are? Like, you need to get your head on straight here because you could do so much. And it's like, it's not that you're not doing stuff, but it's like, you could be so much more than this. And with Novotny, it's similar where, it's not a question of like, he's not physical enough. It's not a question of he's not skilled enough. It's not a question of he's not a good enough shooter. It's not a question of he doesn't get his scoring chances. It's just a matter of like, when he's not dialed in, it's very obvious. And that's very frustrating because you can tell, like, I don't know if it's just that he's kind of floating through the season. He's kind of going from the Czech Pro League to the OHL, which is back against junior competition, which honestly, I was a little surprised that he chose to do that, but I think I expected a lot more just sort of dominance out of him. And you do see it sometimes though. And that's kind of why he's still pretty high on my list, because on some shifts, he's just an absolute beast out there. And I think that on some level you have to grasp onto that. But on another side, like, I could see why Central Scouting, for example, has him as more of a later first round pick, because if there is a level of doubt, then yeah, like it's easy to knock a guy like that down a few pegs. But in terms of the pure sort of fundamentals, like, yeah, I mean, you would know better than me. If he fills a need for Columbus, then absolutely, he could definitely be that sort of high skill, high energy winger that has a good forechecking ability and has a physical side to his game as well. It's just a matter of like, I think there's definitely going to need to be some stuff in his game that gets tweaked and some habits that get, a lot more minimized. And if those things happen, then yeah, he could be a really, really great pickup for sure.
obviously we've talked a little bit about kind of his skill set, what he brings. Where do you see him? Like, what's his ceiling? What's his floor? Is he a top six, like potential winger? Is he a middle six? Like, is it top nine? Like, what's the spectrum of places that you think Novotny can kind of finish?
Yeah,
Ceiling.
I think in the sort of base case, like if I'm the one drafting him and the one sort of in his ear for the next few years, I think a reasonable expectation is sort of a top 9 middle 6 winger, a guy who, he has that fallback of like, he does play with a bit of a physical play to him. He is absolutely, I think, one of the faster guys in the draft this year. When he really gets ahead of steam going, he is a lightning rod on the ice. And so he translates that into physical play as well at times, and he's not small. So that gives him a good sort of baseline to go, all right, if the offense or if the offensive habits don't necessarily develop a ton, then you can maybe get him to fall back into that type of player, and maybe that could be in your third line and have that sort of shooting ability offensively and use that as an asset. So I think the big crux, and I mean, I've said this a million times already, but like the big crux is going to be just, can he just be that top 20% that he is a lot more often? And then I think, second line winger, maybe in the right circumstance with the right guys on his line, on your top line, but I wouldn't expect that. But I think that if he has his head on straight and he is a guy that just competes and goes out and plays that sort of very basic style of play from a starting point, and then the offense is like a bonus on top, then I could see a top 9 guy there. And if the offensive punch becomes more consistent and a little more reliable and projectable, then absolutely I could see him being a really impressive sort of skilled do-it-all type shooty boy winger, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. Is he a guy that you think is not necessarily a project player, but is he a guy that, he is probably going back to Peterborough next season? Is he a couple of years away? Like, I haven't seen anything about him committing to the NCAA.
Yeah.
So I assume he's CHL bound again next year unless something changes. But like, what do you think the timeline is for a guy like Novotny?
That's a very good question. And I would be very curious of what his answer to that would be. I think the right answer is I don't know. I feel like I remember a little something about him maybe going back to the Czech Republic next year. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't think that, it's really tough to say. I don't know if going back to Peterborough is the right call for him. It just really, I don't know. I don't like to insert myself in the boots of a player in their head. I'm not them, but it did kind of feel like Novotny was just there to have a good time sometimes. Like he was just in Peterborough to be the guy. And
like, do you think it was too easy for him, or?
It did seem at times like he was kind of playing down to his opposition. And I think the thing that kind of woke me up a lot to that was seeing him at the World Juniors. Like, I thought him on that Czech team, on the World Junior team, you saw a level of consistency and pace and effort and attack mentality from him that you kind of just go, oh yeah, okay, that's the type of player that I want out of this guy. But then you go watch him with Peterborough, and some of the games you watch, you're just like, well, he could be anybody else, right? Like it's very, very weird. So that's kind of, I don't know if I would consider him a project, but I definitely would be very curious to see if he's the type of person to go, I want a challenge next year. Put me in the American League next year, for example, maybe. I think that there's enough fundamentals there where he could be a guy that plays in the American League next year and just learns. And it's like, look, if you're a third line winger, you just stay there all year. And then maybe a year after that, like, his fundamentals are advanced enough where I think he could do that. And I feel like I'd rather that than going back to Peterborough and scoring 110 points, right? Like he'll have no problem if he has a good summer of training and strength training and development. He'll have no problem going back to Peterborough and doing the same thing again, and then some, right? And so, is that a benefit? I don't really think so. I think in this day and age, being a +1, +2 NHL draft pick, playing in the CHL when so many guys are going off to higher levels and challenging themselves, I think it's a really risky play. So I would be very curious what he has to say about what he wants to do, and go from there. And that's something that we don't get the luxury of knowing. But I think that could be a real deciding factor for a lot of teams on how they value him. Because again, this is a guy with a ton of ceiling. He's got a great track record and a great history of play back in Czechia and playing on the international team. And he was at the World Juniors this year and last year. Like, he has so much going for him, and there's so much good fundamentals to him. But there are big question marks for sure. And so for me, it would be a matter of like, how much does he want to challenge himself? Does he want to go back home for a year or two, right? Like, is that an option? Or do I just put him right in the AHL and give him some time down there, let him percolate, let it see how it goes, and be patient with him and see what happens there? I don't know the right answer to that, but I'm not totally sure Peterborough is the place for him to be.
Yeah, it must be so wild to because he played a season with the Czech men's in the Czech men's league in his would have been his D-1 year, and then went over to Peterborough and played with teenagers for an entire year. And it must have been so wild to go from playing men's hockey in Europe to playing junior hockey here, that I think going back to the Czech league might be a really interesting option to see, okay, how much have I learned in this year away, you know?
Yeah, it's very weird. I didn't. Yeah, it's a very strange story to me, because watching him last year, I thought he looked like an extremely promising player in that league, and I still feel like he is. I have him really high on my list. I love the guy. But yeah, it was very jarring at times to watch him with Peterborough. And like, for example, I mean, this is a guy who scored 34 goals this year, but like well over half of the shot attempts I've tracked, he shoots the puck a lot, but well over half of them are from no man's land. He's just popping it on net from everywhere. And that's not a good thing in my experience. Like, that's not, if you're a CHL scorer and you're scoring from all areas of the offensive zone and there's no consistent sort of getting into those dangerous areas of the ice consistently, then it's really hard to catch up to that. And so that's where that sort of thought in my mind comes from, of like, well, maybe he's just kind of there to think he's better than everybody, right? Like, he's kind of there to just flex on everybody. And in doing so, he kind of has taken the foot off the gas pedal a little bit. And I'm always a fan of having players challenged as hard as they can. And I would agree, I would say that the Ontario League is probably like a fundamentally more pure skilled place to play than Czechia. But that league is no joke over there. That is a physical league. That is a league full of grown men. A lot of former NHLers are in there as well. It's not easy. And so I can understand Novotny being a guy where he might go, well, in my draft year, I'm going to be a lot more visible if I play in Peterborough. And I'm going to be playing bottom 6 minutes at home if I stay. So I would rather go to Peterborough and do my thing and then see where it goes. And maybe that's still what he's trying to figure out. But in terms of where he goes from here and what he's thinking right now, that could be a huge deciding factor for me on like where I actually come down on him, whether it's, you know, I could see him going to the American League next year and being really, really challenged and being really focused, and him going, you know what, Peterborough was a good stop. I learned a lot about how to play the North American game. You know, I learned a lot from the coach that I had there, and but now I'm ready for a real challenge, right? Like, that was a good sort of step into this environment, and I feel good about Cleveland. I feel good about Columbus if this is what happens. And you can sort of take your time with him. And the thing is too, like, if you do that, like, it's always important for fans to remember that if he doesn't hit the ground running in the American League, like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you got to give these guys time and time to figure things out, because the OHL is a big jump to that level. And even if he goes back to the Czech league, I think it is still a pretty decent sized jump in terms of the physical energy in that league. So it's very interesting. He has a number of different pathways, and I'll be very curious to see which way he goes.
I'm going to finish off my conversation with Will about Adam Novotny in just a second, but first I'm going to tell you all about HIMS. ED is way more common than most guys think. Millions of guys deal with it at some point, and that's exactly why HIMS offers a straightforward way to handle it. They connect you with licensed healthcare providers online, giving you access to legitimate ED treatment options from the comfort of your home. No awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines, just a straightforward process that makes it easier to take care of yourself. whole process is super simple. You complete a quick online intake, and a provider is going to review your information. If treatment is right for you, it's going to ship directly to your door in discreet packaging, which makes the whole experience feel private and stress-free. It is straightforward, transparent, and designed to make getting care feel easy. So get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more at hims.com/lockedonnhl. That's hims.com/lockedonnhl for your free online visit. hims.com/lockedonnhl. Prescription required. See website for details and important safety information. Sildenafil is the generic version of Viagra. Viagra is a registered trademark of Viatris, Specialty LLC. Hims is not affiliated with or endorsed by Viatris. I know that you're not like a huge fan of like NHL player comparables with prospects. Obviously, there's never going to be a true one-to-one, but I do think sometimes it's helpful just for people who aren't too familiar with the player to maybe kind of get an idea of what they could be getting. Is there someone that's kind of floating around in the league now that you're like, oh, this is, maybe best case scenario of Adam Novotny? Or...
It's a really good question. I mean, I'm just on NHL's leading scorers list here. Like Thomas Hertl flew by, and like maybe there's something to that, or maybe like if I don't know. I hesitate to say like what Lawson Krause is now, kind of like is how I kind of could see Novotny, because he does have that physicality in his game. He does have that like forechecking energy and that edge to him that I think is very valuable. And Krause is a really great goal scorer at this level. Like he had 25 goals this year, right? So like someone in that range, but at the same time, he might turn on the offensive switch and completely change gears from that sort of more physical player. And I think he could turn out to be more of that maybe Owen Tippett style, high flying, high skill, speed, and just put pucks on net type shooter, who some seasons he might score 30 goals, some seasons he might score 20, and you go, I'm frustrated with this guy. Like it's really hard to know with a guy like Novotny. There's a lot of avenues, but those are kind of the like middle six sort of leaning goal scorer type players that I think he kind of resonates a little bit more with for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I super would not be upset if the Blue Jackets picked up, like you said, Tomas Hertl or Lawson Krause, or even someone like an Owen Tippett. They're good players. Like that feels like a pretty good, correct career trajectory. To me, obviously, you're not super as familiar with the Blue Jackets prospect pool as like the average Blue Jackets person, but how do you feel? Like, where would Novotny fit into the prospect pool? Like, if you look at like maybe the top 10 prospects of the Blue Jackets have right now, like where do you see him potentially fitting in? Because like I said, I think we talked about this earlier this episode, is that the prospect pool has taken a knock with graduations and guys slipping down the rankings and stuff, but does he fit into the top 5, the top 10? Like, what are your immediate thoughts on his prospect pool like positioning?
I think, I feel kind of similarly to him as a guy I felt about like a Jackson Smith, but I think I'm a little more optimistic about Novotny than Smith. And again, that's not a knock on Smith's pure ability. Like his fundamentals are unbelievable, just like Novotny's. But just like Novotny, at times he can be quite a frustrating hockey player to watch. So I feel like he's like a goal scoring winger clone-ish of a guy like Jackson Smith. So do I see him on the same level as what I've seen out of Matejchuk this year? I think maybe you could see him in a similar type of job role in the lineup. Like if Matejchuk is sort of a middle pair guy when all is said and done, and a good one, Novotny being a good sort of middle six scoring winger that can hit and play with speed and all that stuff. I'd have him higher on my board than like a Charlie Ellick for sure. Luca Del Belbaluz, I feel like there's more to him than that guy, and I don't mind Del Belbaluz. Like he's kind of in that Jackson Smith tier, and I would say that on my list, I haven't removed Matejchuk from my database as a prospect yet. That's for next season. So in terms of certainty, there's obviously more with Matejchuk because he's in the NHL right now. But I'd say that I think I'd edge him like a spot higher than Jackson Smith, but they're both very sort of interesting versions of a similar case study.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. I'm admittedly very high on Jackson Smith, but I feel pretty good.
Sure.
about that as a place for a prospect to be. If people want to maybe get more into prospect stuff, if they want to check out your prospect work specifically, where can people find you and your work online?
Yeah, so you can go to YouTube. Well, I mean, I'm assuming you're watching this on YouTube, probably.
Stay on
YouTube,
YouTube is what you're
yeah,
saying.
the Scouching YouTube channel. There's tons of reports going on over there. Novotny will be one. I also didn't mention this, but I'm pretty sure I'll get to doing one on Hextall as well. But Novotny will be getting one at some point, and you can also go to scouching.ca where we have a Discord server under a subscription plan, as well as early access to all these videos and reports and tons of data tables and data fun stuff you can play around with for the draft, and even guys that are drafted. So if you want to track Columbus's prospect pipeline, you can do that there as well. So yeah, mostly just that scouching.ca and the YouTube channel for sure. That's where I'm active.
Perfect. Always great to talk prospect with you.
Oh yeah, always. Yeah, anytime.
That's all I've got for today. Tomorrow we are gonna do an episode on Alex Tuck, I think, of the Buffalo Sabres. He might hit free agency. Is he an option for the Blue Jackets? Is he a better option than some of the pending UFAs that they are looking at themselves? Will he even make it to free agency? All of these things and more. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. If you haven't already, check out the Everydayers Club, lockedonbluejackets.supercast.com. For just $5 a month, you are going to get ad-free episodes of this very show, as well as a bunch of other cool perks. Once again, that's lockedonbluejackets.supercast.com, or click the link in the show notes to learn more. Thank you once again for listening, and until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.